Think about the last time you finished a grueling level of Super Mario, or beat an incredibly difficult boss in Hollow Knight, or even that moment when you finally finished building the perfect home in Minecraft or Enshrouded. What did it feel like? Was there a sense of relief, joy, accomplishment? Were you patting yourself on the back, pumping your fist in the air, or jumping for joy the second you landed that final hit? Were you screaming your lungs out? Now think, when was the last time you felt that way about your actual, real life? And if it's been a while, what if there was something you could do right now to make life feel like a game that you're actually progressing through and winning? Now, I've seen a lot of videos of people talking about how quitting video games changed their life, and I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, their stories and their perspectives are completely valid, and that's simply their life's journey. The lessons that they have to share are also equally important. However, the point I want to make here is that there are also people who are quote unquote winning at life, but haven't necessarily had to quit video games. I mean, they're still able to go to work, go to school, spend time with family, and still log a few hours into the game they're currently playing through. So what's the difference then? What sets these people apart? That's what we're here to uncover. And the first question you have to ask yourself is, what does winning even mean? Because number one, large sums of money ultimately don't make people happy. I mean, just ask the millionaires who tried to cover up the hole in their hearts by constantly buying more and more stuff. Material wealth just doesn't fill that hole. In fact, if you take a good look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll find that self-actualization is at the top of this pyramid, and employment and resources are at the bottom half of the pyramid. So this suggests that when it comes to finding a purpose in life, accumulating material wealth is the least of our desires as human beings. What we actually want is to find and figure out who we are, what we're capable of, and turn that version of ourselves into a reality. Self-actualization in this sense refers to our sense of independence and autonomy. It's having the freedom to explore interests for our own personal sake, and not for the sake of money or an external paycheck. And the thing is, a lot of creative video games that involve, deep narrative stories and journeys and sandbox environments actually give players this desired autonomy. It allows them to be able to express themselves, experiment, and solve complex problems entirely on their own terms. So when it comes to our basic human needs, the reality is that you only need to make enough money to cover the basics like food, shelter, and clothing, and maybe also afford a few luxuries. I mean, with just that, you'll already be able to live a pretty decent and comfortable life. Anything beyond that really is just excess. So what am I saying? I'm basically saying that the purpose of life is not wealth or work. Becoming a CEO or a millionaire doesn't automatically make you the winner at this game of life. I mean, how many movies have we seen exemplify this? From Dustin Hoffman in Kramer versus Kramer to Adam Sandler in Click. We've seen that achievements at work are obviously not the most important thing in life. Being at the top of your class in school isn't the point of life either, because how many cases have there been of dedicated, hard-working students in Asia, Europe, or wherever unaliving themselves all of a sudden because of the pressure of school? In fact, Lao Tzu once famously said, "Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work and then step back. The only path to serenity." So you'll notice in that last line, he says that you shouldn't even care about the results of your work. The work itself is your reward. I mean, this sentiment is echoed in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "You have the right to work, but for work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your work. Desire for the fruits of work must never be your motive in working. Never give way to laziness either. Work done with anxiety about results is far inferior to work done without such anxiety." Simply put, winning at life doesn't mean that you should be stressing about how good or bad you're doing or even how productive you are. So what does this mean then? I mean, how exactly do we win at the game of life? First, find your why. So the first step to anything really is knowing who you are and what you want. And no, I don't mean a mansion or an expensive car or a yacht. I mean, forget material possessions for a moment and really ask yourself what it is you want in life. If you're an artist, it could simply be creative expression. You may want to write and compose your own songs, paint picturesque landscapes, or write fantasy or sci-fi novels with rich worlds. If you're a different kind of creative, you may simply want to see your designs take shape, and maybe the sculptures you create or the furniture you make, or maybe even the buildings and bridges you drew up. So your why could be something as simple as, living a comfortable, carefree life. It could be something as profound as absolute freedom, which may include financial and creative freedom. It could even be something relational, like building a loving family. Think about what drives you, what lights you up, what gets your creative juices flowing. What is something that makes you absolutely excited to keep on living and start creating and building a path towards that? And after you've found your why, the next step you want to take is to create a plan. Every RPG game provides you with a map and a compass. And the reason is simple, so that you can plan your route from point A to point B. So without this map, you won't know where to find your next objective. You won't know what landmarks to look out for, and you won't have a general sense of where you are in the world you inhabit. And then without a compass, you'll end up wandering aimlessly in every direction. You won't know how to navigate the map, and you'll have a more difficult time reaching a quest marker's pinned location. The thing is, life works in exactly the same way. Without a compass to guide you, you won't know which direction to take. Without a map to show you the bigger picture, you could easily get lost and never find your way. So once you've established what it is you want, whether that's to publish a book, release an album, or create a business, and the reason or the why behind it, start mapping out what that road looks like on the path to success. If your goal is to become an author, for example, then you need to map out how you're going to get from idea to book to published. So generally, novels are about 50,000 words. So then create a plan for how you can reach 50,000. When NaNoWriMo or National Novel Writing Month was still a thing, the basic path to success was to write approximately 1,666 words a day until you reached 50K. So what's your plan then? How will you implement it on a daily or weekly basis? So when I think about gaming, there's one thing that thrills me about playing a game like Skyrim or even Breath of the Wild, and it's the sheer scale of it. The freedom to choose what it is you want to do next. And the thing that frustrates me about Skyrim and Breath of the Wild is also this same thing, the sheer scale of it, and the freedom to choose what it is you want to do next. But when you think about Breath of the Wild, though, it does a better job of getting you on track of what it is you're supposed to be doing. Whereas in Skyrim, I would argue that not so much. So this is why I finished both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I've honestly never finished Skyrim, because I always end up getting sidetracked by all the side quests available in the game. In fact, when I think about my last playthrough, I've done so many side quests that I reached level 50 without having spoken to S-Burn yet. I mean, it's one of the games where I really completely lose track of the main quest. Because for me, my tendency is that whenever I play an RPG, I usually collect every side quest available whenever I first enter a new town and finish them all before I proceed with the main quest. So this habit came from playing old CRPGs like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, wherein the only way to gather experience was to complete every quest. And so that's how I treated Skyrim. When you compare it to Breath of the Wild, where you didn't have as much side quests, you could focus mostly on the main quest. And so, as you can imagine, that becomes difficult in Skyrim, wherein you have hundreds and hundreds of side quests. And when you think about it, real life can feel the same way. You're bombarded with all these tasks and obligations. You know, you have to do the laundry, you have to finish this task from your boss, you have to complete this school project, train for this competition, see this movie with your friends, play this newly launched video game, etc., etc. You know, so much is happening all at once that it's easy to lose sight of your goal or your main quest. So the question you first have to ask yourself is, what is your main quest? You know, what's the biggest goal that you want to achieve in this life? What steers you up and makes you excited? So in the book The One Thing by Gary Keller, he poses this one very important question that you should ask yourself on a daily basis to help you get back on track. And that question is, you know, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So when you think about it, that makes sense, right? You know, if you finish the main quest, then all these side quests seem unnecessary. They're just icing on the cake. You only need to complete them if you're the completionist type of player or you want to get a platinum on this game. But ideally, they're not part of the main quest anymore. So when you're reviewing your life's goals, you know, ask yourself this same question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? You know, write it down. Tape it to your wall or to your screen. Maybe even turn it into a desktop wallpaper. At one point, I did that myself. Now, once you've gotten your one thing down on paper, it's time to plan your route. So we talked about the importance of a map and a compass earlier. So this is how to practically apply that wisdom. And that's to simply set up milestone markers. So let's say that your one thing is to write a book. So you list down what are the milestone markers involved in that. So they could be as simple as, you know, outline the main plot, flesh out the characters, finish writing Act 1, writing Act 2, writing Act 3, and then edit for grammar, edit for story, create a book cover, self-publish on Royal Road, Wattpad, or even Amazon, KDP, and then market the book. So now you have a clear picture of what it takes and how much effort you're going to need to reach the finish line. You have a clear picture of how your main quest is going to go. You have a map to the treasure chest, basically, and this is your big picture view. Some people, of course, are able to work off of these milestones, but sometimes for many of us, we may need to break things down into even smaller steps, you know, smaller markers. For the vast majority of us, the best way to achieve a goal is to break it down into a daily system or process, or break it down into daily habits. This is where I learned something called the Daily Big Three. It's something I learned from Michael Hyatt, who's the author of Your Best Year Ever and Free to Focus. So at the start of every morning, so Michael Hyatt recommends thinking about your big three. So namely, what are the three big tasks that can help you move the needle towards your goal? So if you think about the one thing, you know, what are the three big things now that make everything else easier or unnecessary? So if your goal is to write a book within a month, then naturally one of your daily big three would be to write 1,666 words a day. And if you want to finish writing it in 3 months, then you have to write about 555 words a day. If your goal, for example, involves building a YouTube channel, then your daily big three could look something like record this week's video, outline a script for next week's video, or brainstorm ideas for next month's content. On the other hand, if one of your goals in life is to improve yourself enough so that you can get a girlfriend, then maybe your daily big three would look something like weight training workout, practice smiling, and small talk with strangers, or maybe read a chapter of How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, 3 tasks a day. That's all you need to stay on track with achieving your goals. So the goal here is to build a predictable system that will get you from the start of the game all the way to the final boss. And that system naturally involves building the right habits. There's this quote or maxim that was popularized by 19th century thinkers like Charles Reed and Samuel Smiles that somewhat perfectly sums up our human experience. The quote is, "Sow a thought and you reap an act. Sow an act and you reap a habit. Sow a habit and you reap a character. Sow a character and you reap a destiny." I mean, it's been said before that man is a creature of habit, and the things we repeatedly do shape who we are and who we eventually become. This is why one of the habits I encourage you to develop is the habit of getting clear in the morning the 3 most important things that you have to accomplish to bring you closer to your goals. In fact, James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, also says, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity." So if you want to become a writer, then write every day. Try to get a certain number of words down no matter how difficult. This is what Stephen King did to get to where he is today, with multiple best-selling novels, several movies based off of them. I mean, it's what sets him apart from someone like George R.R. Martin, who now can no longer finish writing his fantasy series. If your goal is to become a proficient musician, then make it a habit to practice your scales or the piece you're working on every single day. If your goal is to be a full-time YouTuber, then make a habit of producing and publishing videos at least once a week. I like how the author Jeff Goins puts it when he titled one of his books, "You Are a Writer, so start acting like one." I mean, it's a very apt and appropriate maxim. If you believe yourself to be someone or something, then start acting as if, even if you haven't arrived there yet. Of course, building the right habits and maintaining them on a daily basis can still be difficult. However, there are ways to help you achieve the best results and keep yourself on track. The first being to prep your environment. So when you think about it, your environment or the things around you play a huge factor when it comes to building and maintaining your desired habits. So think for a moment about how in Terraria, you want to create the most efficient workshop by spacing all of these different crafting tables next to each other. And you'll find several techniques online about the best placement of your workbench, your anvil, your forge, etc. So that you don't have to keep walking around just so you can craft a specific item. So this principle can be applied in life as well. If your goal is to learn the guitar, for example, it doesn't really help if you place your guitar in the corner of your room where it's barely visible. I mean, I forgot which author talked about this. It may have been Hal Elrod, author of Miracle Morning. But when he had this desire to play the guitar, what he would do is he would place the guitar in the middle of the room, right in plain sight, as a reminder that he had to practice his scales and chords at least 30 minutes a day. Or the story goes something like that. And that's just one way for you to prep your own environment or your room or your office so that it favors the habits that you're trying to build. A second tip would be to remove the obstacles that stop or prevent you from performing a habit. So, for example, if one of the habits you want to build is to exercise or go to the gym every morning, you want to remove as many obstacles or steps between you and the workout as possible. So, this could mean wearing your workout clothes while you sleep, so you don't have to think about them when you wake up. Or it could mean already placing them next to your bed, or in the bathroom, or in the car. Picking them out and laying them out the night before relieves you of your zombie morning brain from having to exert itself when you get up. The earlier example about the guitar is also a way to remove obstacles that step in between you and the habit you want to create. So by putting that guitar in plain sight, ready to be picked up and played at any given moment, you remove the physical and mental effort it takes just to pick up the guitar and play. So for me, one way that I maintain my reading and journaling habits, for example, is to get them ready on my desk, where they're easy to reach. So that every time I step into my office to start my workday, there's less friction between me and my will and motivation and my habits. Because habit formation isn't about trying to maintain the willpower to perform these habits on a daily basis. Willpower can easily be depleted. So instead, it's about taking the steps necessary to ease into the habit so that it becomes automatic, in the sense that you no longer have to think about it, you no longer have to muster the will to do it. It's just automatic. So James Clear also talks about habit stacking, wherein you insert one of the habits you want to build in between a habit that you already have. So this is another way to turn that action that initially required willpower into a habit that's just automatic. An example of this would be if you tend to brew your coffee when you get up in the morning, you can insert a reading habit as you're waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. Or maybe whenever you sit on the toilet, instead of taking your phone with you to scroll through social media, maybe take a book instead, where you can learn something new rather than mindlessly scroll through TikTok or Instagram. So lastly, when you're trying to build a habit, you want to be able to give yourself a reward. So, habits are better solidified when there's a reward involved. And the reward could be something as simple as a piece of candy, or even a sticker that you can place onto a calendar or a habit tracker. It could even be you just patting yourself on the back, or playing that Final Fantasy or Chrono Cross victory theme and then doing a little dance, or just pumping your fist in the air. There's a reason that stickers work for kids. It enforces the habit that you want them to create. And so for me personally, I use this app called Habitica to track my habits and give myself small rewards. So if you're not familiar with it, Habitica is a simple habit tracker that you can download on your phone or load onto your web browser that literally helps you treat your life like an RPG game. So you create a character, you choose a class, you give yourself tasks or quests to accomplish, and every time you accomplish a habit or a task, you're rewarded with experience and with gold. So you get to slowly watch your character level up every single task you accomplish, and it's weirdly satisfying in its own way. You can even set dailies where if you fail to accomplish these habits, you receive damage to your health. And if you receive enough damage such that your health falls to 0, you lose a level. So it's one way to help you keep track of your goals and habits and really reinforce that reward system, even if it's just virtual experience and gold. Now, as you go about building new habits and creating this new version of yourself, you're obviously going to run into challenges. You're going to run into complications. You're going to break your streaks and start over several times. And it's important to recognize that, this is perfectly fine. You don't need to beat yourself up about it. In the same way that you probably don't beat yourself up over not being able to defeat a boss on the first or second try, you shouldn't be raining down all that negative self talk every time you fail to do a task. Like every roguelike game teaches us, failure is a natural step towards growth and progress. So, detach yourself from the results. That doesn't mean that you should ignore them if you're doing bad. It only means that you shouldn't be too emotionally involved in how good or how bad you're doing. If one of your YouTube videos hits 100,000 views and then the next hits only 1,000, you don't have to stress too much about it. Instead, focus on the joy you experience while you do the work. Again, like the Bhagavad Gita says, you have the right to work, but for the work's sake only. You have no right to the fruits of your work. I firmly believe that as long as you continue to love what you do and produce for the joy of it, you will eventually find the kind of success that sustains you and helps you continue to produce the thing that you love most. Now, the one thing that I dislike or disagree with about this whole hustle culture thing is the fact that they're so focused on results to the point that they recommend that you constantly push towards your goals regardless of the fact that you're already putting your health at risk. They boast about getting only 4 to 5 hours of sleep, working 16 to 20 hour days and all that. And that's the reason they're able to achieve their goals. But, when you think about it, the question is, are they winning at life? When you look at the research, according to one study from Stanford University, the level of productivity you give after working 50 to 55 hours a week drops significantly. In fact, if you're working 70 hours a week, you're really only getting the same amount of work done as someone who is putting in 55 hours. It's crazy, right? And this simply means that human beings were not created to simply work. And part of the reason and the purpose we are here, I believe, also involves play. It involves love. It involves participating in life not to produce results, but to create experiences that are well worth looking back on and remembering. Think about it. When you find yourself on your deathbed, you won't look back at all the hours you spent in the office chasing after your dreams. Rather, the things you'll look back on are the moments you spent with the people you love, doing the things you love. Winning in life isn't about being a productive human being. Winning in life is about being a loving human being or a creative human being. So now the question is, are you ready to take charge of your life, stop getting distracted, and actually pave the way towards your own personal hero's journey? Because if you enjoyed these tips and lessons, then I've got actually a little cheat sheet that you can use right now, today, if you sign up for my mailing list, which the link is in the description below. So what is this cheat sheet? It's sort of like a printable daily journaling page that you do at the start of your day to help keep track of where you're at with your goals and how you can better achieve them. The tips I gave earlier, they're inside of this cheat sheet, the big 3, etc. Or if that's not enough, you can also get my main quest log, which is not only includes this daily quest log, but also a project planning sheet, a monthly habit tracker, 3 sheets that you can quickly print and use right away to help you stop getting distracted by side quests and start focusing on that main quest you've been putting off for quite some time now. These cheat sheets are nothing revolutionary. In fact, you can easily make your own if you want to. But if you want to try out my system or what's been working for me so far, or if you want to even just support this channel, my main quest log is the same price as a cup of coffee. It's not some overblown online course. So if you're interested, you can check out the link in the description below.